Hello, I'm Montgomery County Auditor Carl Keith, and welcome to another episode of Auds and Ends. Auds and Ends is a production of the Montgomery County Auditor's Office. We do, on a monthly basis, we have episodes where we have conversations with members of our community and talk about some of the roles they play in the community and the things that they do and the work that they're doing and what kind of an impact that's having on the community. And my guest this month is very special to me because she's a very good friend and we go back a long way. We've been through a number of things together, and I'm very pleased to welcome Nan Whaley as our guest today. Nan, of course, is the former Mayor of Dayton and former candidate for governor of Ohio. Let's see, 2 terms as a Dayton City Commissioner, 2 terms as mayor, candidate for governor, and then, of course, and she, as a former deputy county auditor,
exactly.
too. More importantly,
I like to say I was Carl's very first hire.
That is true.
Right.
She was the very first person I hired after I became county auditor.
That's
so
right.
That's great. So we go back a ways.
It's absolutely.
And how did we first meet?
Well, I think the first time we met was in 1996, and I was the president and active in the College Democrats at the University of Dayton.
Oh, so when we got to know each other when
we were
both in College Democrats.
College. Yeah, I don't think you were in College Democrats. You went to Miami, right?
Yeah.
So we met there. You were active and volunteering. You worked at the county auditor's office at the time for A.J. Wagner, and I was taking a bus to Democratic headquarters to help out. I think we met in 96. I might have met you briefly in 94 when I took a bus down there to do some mailings, but I don't remember you that time.
Well, when did you graduate?
I graduated in 98.
Graduated in 98.
Yes, so 96. And I remember one of my first memories of you is that you got the job of driving around Bruce Hornsby, when Bill Clinton came to speak at the courthouse. And I was in his motorcade.
Yes.
And
that was in 96.
96, and you got to drive Bruce Hornsby and the Range, but it was just Bruce Hornsby.
Just Bruce.
And you had to carry that bag of his around.
I did.
Yes.
I did. That's one thing about being active in politics is we have had some interesting responsibilities along the way, interesting things that we've had to do. That's probably right around that time. You were a student at UD.
Yes.
You were definitely a student at UD. And then, yes, when I became county auditor, you were the very first person I called and offered a job, and the rest is history. You worked in the auditor's office, 5 years?
5 years, from 2001 to January of 2006. So January to January, yeah.
And left when you were elected Dayton City Commissioner. So
Correct.
You were if I got this right, you were the youngest woman ever elected to the Dayton City Commission.
Yes, I mean, it's not hard. There's only been 7 women elected to the Dayton City Commission, so it was easy to be the youngest. And I was 29.
Well, so Nan, in all of these responsibilities as Dayton City Commissioner, or Dayton Mayor, candidate for governor, is it safe to say you've been a trailblazer for young people and for women? I mean, how old were you when you ran for governor?
Well, the first time, I didn't make the ballot the first time, but gosh, I was 39.
Yeah.
I was young. And then maybe 40. And then this past time when I ran. So like a trailblazer, like I think definitely like being the first female nominee for governor of Ohio from any party. There's only been like one other woman that's run statewide from the top of the ticket, and that was back in 98 with Mary Boyle when she ran for U.S. Senate. We're it, which is a sad commentary really on the state. For sure. Like the thing that I take away from the governor's race.
Everyone has to be the first, though.
Right.
It has to be a first.
Yeah, and I hope like it cut down some shrubbery and stuff for more women to be able to take that path a little easier. That's one of the challenges of being a first. But in the city commission and mayor's race, frankly, like definitely wanted to, support women and be supportive of women, but I didn't feel as much of a trailblazer. There's been lots of women that have been elected officials, and I frankly didn't feel the issue of being a woman as much as I did until I got in the governor's race, which I think is a good thing, frankly. in Dayton. I thought that spoke highly of Dayton. I've always said, I'm not, Carl, I'm not from here. I'm not even from Ohio. I got here as fast as I could to go to the University of Dayton. But I always said it's amazing. The city's amazing. I was 29, elected for a city commission race. City commissioners run citywide in Dayton. I didn't even own a house. I was renting my home. I have no relatives in Dayton. Wasn't married, was dating my husband, who is my husband now at the time. And the people of Dayton said, oh, yeah, this young woman, that's who we want. And that just doesn't happen a lot in other communities I've been around the state and country. I just think that says a lot about how opening, frankly, Dayton is to people that aren't from here. And even communities around us, like Cincinnati, is not like that. And so I think that says a lot about how Dayton wants to have new people and people that aren't necessarily from here come and make their name. And that's, I think, what's special about this city.
Even though you're not from here originally, you certainly have, it's your home now.
Absolutely.
So you bought a home here, you met your husband here.
I did. He's from Xenia, so from the area.
Yeah. So it's your home now.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've lived on the block I live on now. Can you believe this? I've lived there 23 years.
Oh, my.
So almost half my life I've lived on this one block.
Yeah. What do you think? How do you think the auditor's office prepared you for that?
Well, I learned a lot in working for you and in the county office. So I think
good and bad.
Yeah, I mean everything's good and bad, right? But mostly good. For me, it was really my first real job coming into the auditor's office. Before I worked for you, I worked at Democratic headquarters, which I guess is a real job, but it's a different kind of experience.
A different kind of experience, yes.
Where you're the only person that's paid there, and that was the role I held for a few years. So
a lot of volunteer staff.
Yes, yes. We had all kinds of volunteer staff, as you know, some really special friends there. Yes. And so, cut my teeth at a building that doesn't exist anymore on Wilkinson Street. And then, so going into the county building was really the first opportunity I had to be in a professional staff. And I learned a lot about professionalism, frankly, working for you. And the thing I learned the most, and I think your staff and you hold this up now, because you've been county auditor now, 24 years? Can you believe it?
The same amount of time you've been living
on Rowe Avenue. Is that you always said when we were doing things, we needed consistency. And that's something I've always taken away. A lot of times elected officials or offices or work, they'll do one thing one time. And it, if you're in government and if you're working in government, you have to be consistent and constant. And I took that away as something I have to say, I really felt when I worked for you. It was always about the schedule, about making sure that we communicated regularly, that there was a season to things, and not things that you would think of summer, winter, spring or fall, but a season to the auditor's office too. And
we have a cycle of events that goes on.
And you cannot decide, if you have a leader that decides they don't want to do things, then nothing gets done. But really focusing on that consistency and making sure that it happens was something I took away from the auditor's office. I'll give an example on why that matters. When I was mayor, the mayor before me had exactly, I think, one state of the city. And for me, I knew I had to do a State of the City every single year, even a month after I was sworn in, and it was going to be on the second Wednesday of February. And because the voters and the people of Dayton deserve consistency, and you have to make sure you're pushing that. If I decided as mayor I wasn't going to have a State of the City, it just wouldn't happen.
Didn't have to do it, right?
Right, but I think that consistency is really key in government. And we're thinking about these things all the time, but most people aren't, and so that really helps them understand the work that needs to happen. So that you probably didn't think I was going to say that, but that is one of the biggest takeaways I had from working for you.
Well, I want to tell you that speaking of consistency, you instituted some things there in the office that continue today. We still do the added up.
Fridays.
Every Friday.
That's right. Consistent Friday.
Added up to things we send out to email. We send out to staff with just events that are going on and things that birthdays and that kind of thing. We still do added up. We still have the audit trail.
Yes.
And so things like that you started when you were there, we've continued to do, like you said, because you can never do. Well, I tell people when it comes to promoting the things that we do and being, whether it be dog licenses or gas pumps or property taxes, you can never educate the public enough. You can never involve the public enough, and I'm sure you found that to be true. What about your run for governor?
Well,
is there another run for governor in you?
I don't know. Sam says no decisions. I learned a lot on the governor's race, and really ran, even though I didn't make the ballot the first time, it was really a two-time effort. And
everyone says you've got to lose statewide. Right. You have to lose statewide one time.
I got that down. So I think looking back, it's been almost 2 years now, and it was a grueling experience for sure. I mean, this is 88 counties. And
you visited all 88, didn't you?
Of course, yeah, that's a big deal. One of the things you must do, and both Bob Taft and Ted Strickland, when I asked them about running back in 2017, when I was thinking about it the first time, they told me the same thing, and it's kind of funny, the advice. They gave me different advice. Bob Taft told me to get a really good driver, because that you're going to spend all your time with that person, because you spend so much time on the highways and two-lane highways and streets of Ohio, because it's not a place you fly, it's a place you drive.
Right.
And you're on the road a lot. And then Governor Strickland said, you just have no idea how much windshield time you have. And so it's kind of interesting.
Windshield time.
Yeah, that's what he called it. And so you talk about two former governors, and here's what they remember about running for governor is how much being in a car. And it's really the truth. So I think that's the grueling part. If you spend 2 years in a car across Ohio, that can get pretty tough every day. You have a new understanding and appreciation for truck drivers and people that do that every single day. But I'll tell you, the thing I really liked about it is that you would go around the state and people you've never met before, and you've worked been an elected official for years. It's a different kind of feeling than when you're in a local race. So when you're running locally, this is a bigger city, but it's still a small town. You always know somebody.
Sure.
You always know someone. But you would go into places, and there would be 200 people, and they knew you in a way that I didn't know them, and that was a big change from the local races, and it was humbling, frankly, that people would take their evenings and take their time to go and get active in these races and come and listen. I just was always struck by how important people took the work, and the activists and the volunteers across the state that did that. But it was difficult. It was electorally, it's the toughest thing I've ever done. And it should be tough. I mean, when you're asking someone to support you for being the leader of, such a populous state as Ohio, it should be a tough go. And it definitely is. The other takeaway is, as you run for bigger offices, you just have less control. And so the state of what's going on nationally, the state of what's going on, you just have very little control. So
international affairs, the global economy,
right.
Impacts your
right. The Supreme Court decision completely changed the race over the fall of Roe in the middle of our campaign, which was good for us, but terrible for the state, terrible for the country. And so it's those kind of things you can't really anticipate happen, and you have to roll with it. And then the last thing I'll say is, in a local race, money matters on a campaign, for sure. We talk about it, but it doesn't hold a candle to the amount of money spent statewide. I think the governor, who was my opponent, I think he spent around $80 million on our race. Never was behind, but that's just what he spent to define us. And as someone that's from Dayton, from a working class background, that we could not compete with that kind of money.
Right.
So and I knew that, but then experiencing that is just a different level.
Well, you didn't have the networks that he has,
Well, yeah, he'd been in office since I was 9 months old, which I like to remind everybody. And, I'm 48 now, so you can do the math.
Yeah, I've been in office and held statewide offices and been a U.S. senator, U.S. congressman.
And he had the power of incumbency, which is very powerful in Ohio.
Yes. You and I had conversations before you made the decision to run for governor. And, because sometimes people would say, why governor? why don't you run for Congress, or why don't you run for, state representative or state senator, or, secretary of state, or why governor? And I think you did that for very deliberate reasons.
Yes, I mean, a lot of people would say, like, well, you should, especially the first time, why don't you run for Secretary of State or state rep or et cetera? Number one, I'm really interested in executive offices. I was a mayor, enjoyed the role of being in charge. And those offices are more pragmatic, and they have a bigger opportunity, I think, of getting stuff done. Not that legislation isn't important. It is important. We see the impact it has. But it is a lot more of putting a law into place and then waiting to see the law enacted. And I like the work of impact that you have as mayor or governor. And so that was really key. And then secondly, I just felt like when people would say, like, well, Nan, you're from Dayton and you're a woman, why don't you run on the down ballot? That's what they've been telling women in the state since we had the vote, 100 years ago. And I just felt like I wasn't doing my gender right. If I thought I was the best candidate for governor, then by God, I was going to run for governor.
Right.
And it shouldn't be because a man wants to run that the woman get out of the way. I mean, I don't know how many times they have to do that in this state. And so for me, that was a really important point too.
So now you're with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. You were president of Conference of Mayors. Well, when you were mayor, right?
Correct. Yes.
And now, since the governor's race, you've taken on a job with them, membership.
Yes, I'm the director of membership.
So tell us a little bit about what your responsibilities are with the U.S. Conference of Mayors.
Yeah. So I loved the conference, and I was president of it when I was mayor. And basically, that's the conference has 1,452 mayors. Any city over 30,000 is part of our membership.
Okay.
And my colleagues chose me to be the president of the organization. And look, that was a big deal because it's not like Dayton's a big city in that. We're not even a top 100 city. So it was quite an honor to be chosen by my peers to be the president of the conference. The conference does really great work. It's one of the last bipartisan organizations in the country for government. Like if you think about the National Governors Association, for example, they're not able to get the Democrat and Republican governors to come together on issues. The Democratic governors and Republican governors make their decisions now that way because partisan politics has gotten so tough. But the Conference of Mayors has always been very about Democrat and Republicans coming together. And to that end, when I was president of the conference, we were able to advocate the passage of ARPA, the American Rescue Plan money. Would not have happened without the Conference of Mayors. And it was myself and a Republican mayor, Jeff Williams of Arlington, Texas, that led that issue. And then we advocated for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. The mayors used to tease that we were in infrastructure week for 10 years and finally got it passed. And it was myself and David Holt, the Republican of Oklahoma City, that were the co-chairs. So really push advocacy to bring money directly to cities. That's really what the work we do. And as the director of membership, I get to visit mayors from across the country and really work to make sure that they have the leadership skills they need to handle what is a very unique job because there's only one mayor in every single city. And then also, provide efforts for advocacy. So, for example, we'll be heading to D.C. around homelessness and housing here soon. Probably the number one issue for cities in the country right now, and really working on, getting federal help for that work.
When you're in a position of leadership, as you have been now for a number of years, you oftentimes become known for certain issues or certain events that you've had to deal with and exercise leadership. We talk about leadership. And so I feel like we have to talk about your time as mayor and your experience with the Oregon district shooting because, not only was that important here in Dayton, but unfortunately continues to be an issue throughout our country, and you are a leader on how to deal with that, and I was always impressed with you and the work that you did around that time. But you're continuing to do that work. Correct.
Yeah. So 2019 was a rough year for Dayton for sure. If you remember that year, we had the water main break-in in February. You remember that was terrible for Dayton. We had The 15 tornadoes that ripped
The
through the
tornado.
city.
The tornado.
That came through the city, which now is a new thing that happens a lot more often to cities. We had the Ku Klux Klan that came to visit us from Indiana. And then in August, we had the mass shooting that killed 9 and injured 27 in 32 seconds. And as mayor, and again, the conference was key in this, I would always go and listen to the mayors that had just had a mass shooting. I always felt like it wasn't a question of if, but when. And so, the mayor that had the latest mass shooting would come and speak, and I would pick up different things about what they went through. It just seemed to be like the worst thing you could really go through. And so I'd always felt that kind of like, oh gosh, poor so-and-so that just had to do that. And then it happened to us. And I mean, I think most people know the story. It was the middle of the night. My neighbor, who was also in the law department at the city, knocked on my door, told me that there had been a mass shooting. And I remember I wanted to just get out the door and go to it. And luckily him and Sam, my husband, were like, you should probably get dressed for the day because, yoga pants for the day probably wasn't going to make it. And I just remember being in the shower going okay, well, we just got to move through this. And it was, terrible. It was almost a time when I look back on it, almost, surreal experience of this week. I thought it would only last a day. It really lasted about 2 weeks. If you think about the period of the shooting to the show that Dave Chappelle did for the community, there's about 2 weeks. And it galvanized the country as well. And that's, I think, what was surprising to me. If you look at polls today, going back, there's 2 times that the nation has actually moved around doing common sense gun safety, and one was Parkland, and the other was Dayton, El Paso, where you can see the move up around doing something around gun violence. And I think that's the people of Dayton and the way they responded in just an amazing way. But frankly, I just would not have gotten through that if it hadn't been my fellow mayors. And so I think that's one of the reasons why this job is so key for me now. Buddy Dyer, who is the mayor of Orlando, and if you remember, he had the Pulse nightclub shooting.
Yes,
that was terrible. Yes. Called me that morning and said, Nan, you need to make sure that where you tell the victims that have lost loved ones that they're far away from the media. We didn't do that in Orlando, and it was terrible for these people going through the worst time of their life to, be on national news. Bill Peduto, who had the Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh, called that morning and was like, listen, it is all about the victims' families, and, make sure that your focus is right there. So, I mean, I could not have gotten through that without my fellow mayors. I think by the end of that, week, I think 55 mayors had reached out to me in some way, even if it was a text, a call, from all kinds of cities, big and small. And I remembered that, and I remember even wrote down all the cities that had reached out to me, because it was just so strong and so powerful, their support. They went with me to D.C., where we tried to get change. So 20 mayors come and stand and say, it's time because of Dayton. And
you testified for Congress.
I testified before Congress, spoke to the Senate Democrats first time. I think I was the second person ever that was not a senator that spoke in front of them. And then my state mayors, the mayors of the state, were amazing too. We went to the State House, and Senator Lehner, who's now a mayor, actually we went up to. She and Kenny Yuko got us a room to do a press conference there. And I'll never forget, because the shooting affected Senator Lehner so much that she got up and said, I've been wrong on this issue my whole career, and apologized. Said, I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get here. And so you saw that kind of movement. It gave you hope that you would get some sort of movement on gun safety. And, I feel like for me, I felt the point of Dayton was that it doesn't have to happen to another city. And so, frankly, you just would work like a maniac to try to get some sort of change, and we weren't successful there. And so I know now that every city hopes and every mayor hopes they're the last one. And so I always make a point of calling every mayor that this has happened to from small cities, the one that sticks in is the Highland Park shooting up in Chicago, Nancy Rotering, talked to her an hour after that shooting that happened in a parade, if you remember.
Yes, yeah.
Or the mayor of Buffalo. I talked to him while he was in the grocery store seeing the bodies. So, like it's a terrible place, a terrible friendship, a terrible alliance to be in. But I think we all stick together through it because we're all the only ones that really know what that's really like. And I have to say that the mayors have learned a lot from each other in it. We now have a mass shooting protocol that we send out. We try to send it out proactively. I've sent it to mayors before they have a shooting now, but certainly right away when they have one.
And you and I have talked about this. It's sad that we have to do this,
yes.
but I think it's important that you are doing this.
You have to do it. Until we get change, we always advocate for change. And, it's a maddening issue because the vast majority are with us. I think something like 72% of Ohioans, so it'd be higher even across the country, 72% of Ohioans support universal background checks, and yet we can't get that. Yeah. Now, I have to say, I'm going to put a plug in for our friend Steve Dettelbach, who is the head of the ATF. I'm really proud of him and stay in touch with him in this work. And, they did close the loophole. Last week, Dettelbach did that. And I want to say Steve has been just great. Actually has said, they also, the Biden administration changed the rule on there was a special piece that the Dayton shooter used that allowed him to hold
make it a multiple
thing. Dettelbach got rid of that. And he said because he learned that from Dayton. So there have been things that have changed because of people learning of how terrible it was here that can't happen again. And so I'm appreciative of their leadership that makes that happen.
When you were mentioning now Mayor Lehner, Peggy Lehner, it reminded me, remember we had the Do Something
yes, we had the
campaign,
Do Something,
you and me
and Peggy
Lehner. We got the signs,
yard signs. She donated money for the yard signs.
Yeah, so we could do those Do Something signs. We don't have a whole lot of time left, and of course we knew this was going to be. We could sit here and talk all day, but I do want you to say a little bit about the City of Learners. I know when you were mayor, one of the first things you did was declare Dayton as a City of Learners and the preschool promise. Just a little bit about what that meant to you, and be able to exercise that leadership.
Yeah. So when people ask me what are you most proud of as being mayor, there's two things, and one is high-quality preschool for every 3- and 4-year-old in the city of Dayton. And the second is this group called the Ohio Mayors Alliance, which is much like the conference, but just for the state. It still goes strong, where the mayors advocate for themselves in the state legislature, which is a very dangerous place.
Yes.
So I'm proud of those two things, but really, really proud of Preschool Promise and the work that we did to set the play for City of Learners. When I came in, and this, Carl. Here's a secret for the podcast: is Carl used to write nearly all my speeches when I was first elected mayor, and I have no pride of authorship. I had lots of people that would help me this over the years, and so when someone would say, "Oh, that was a great speech," I'd be like, "Oh, really? Carl wrote it. That's fine." So I'm always honest about that. But the City of Learners set us up to be able to go after the earnings tax that created the Preschool Promise and was just renewed by voters of Dayton by 72%, which is a huge number in these days around tax replacements, et cetera. And they told me when they were doing that they have served already over 9,000 students.
Nice.
And look, it's incredible. It is working. It is making our kids in Dayton ready for kindergarten, which was what it's about. It's helping parents that are, we go into COVID having huge challenges with childcare. It's still a challenge, but we have a lot more childcare providers in Dayton because Preschool Promise is holding and supporting them. So those are the things I'm most proud of as mayor, and glad to see that they keep on going after I go. I think that's the sign of really good leadership,
that's your legacy,
that it keeps on going. And so great job, Mayor Mems, for getting that passed so well. He's the most popular mayor ever. Wins big numbers, and and the Preschool Promise went through so quickly and so well.
Well, Nan, it was easy to write speeches for you because you inspire me. And just hearing you talk today about some of your experiences and the leadership that you've exercised, not only in this community but throughout the state and throughout the nation, it's inspiring. And we really appreciate you and the work that you've done and the work that you've been in. I'm so happy that Dayton, Ohio, and Dayton adopted you many years ago, and that you've chose this to be your home.
Well, Carl, thank you. And I couldn't say I could not do it without you, because that's the truth.
Oh.
You took a chance on A little aggressive personality. I can imagine some of the calls you got when you hired me, and you've stayed with me and supported me through all of my leadership, and I could not do it without you, so thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and thank everyone for joining us. We're going to cut this off. Maybe we'll have you back.
I'd be happy to.
Have back, because there's all kinds of other things we could talk
Exactly.
about. So, but thank you for being here with us today. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of Odds and Ends. We'll see you next time.